professionals as well as entrepreneurs. Let me take a quick survey. How many of you are inventors? Do we have any inventors in the room?
2%.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you are either self-employed professionals or entrepreneurs? Can I see those hands?
That's fine. You'll be
Oh,
done
wow.
by the time I need it.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, anyhow, welcome to all of you. We look forward to seeing you at Techno Apocalypse, the second Friday of January. All right, that's it for me. That's about as much as I need. Thank you, Trent.
Sure.
All right.
And then possibly, Thomas, did you want to introduce the Institute?
Sure. Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Thomas Fry. I was the founder of the Vinci Institute. We started back in '97. That was about 2 or 3 lifetimes ago, long time ago. And we started as a futurist think tank, and the business model has evolved quite a bit over the years. I work as a professional speaker, so I travel around the world giving talks on the future, and it's always around the topic of technology-driven change and how technology is kind of pulling the legs out from under us a lot of times. So we are constantly looking at trying to understand what the future holds, and have different techniques for doing that. I'd like to introduce Michael Cushman. Michael is heading up our consulting division. So any projects that we get dealing with consulting, he manages that, and I tend to run around the world giving talks on lots of strange topics. So tonight we're going to be looking at Bitcoin here and some of the cryptocurrency world. Normally we start at 7 o'clock here. We're starting just a few minutes early here, but this is such a hot topic. I'm sure we're going to have lots of discussion. One of the things we do here is we do have a co-working space. Anybody that might be looking for office space, we'd love to talk with you. We have a couple extra offices that have just opened up recently, and we have epic views of the mountains here. So this is one of the highest elevations in the metro area. So we're actually sitting here higher than the high-rise buildings in downtown Denver right now. So that's good to know. And so if you're looking for office space, just let us know, and we'll give you a quick tour of the space here. With that, I would like to hand it off to Trent, and he's going to introduce our speaker tonight.
Absolutely. So by show of hands, how many of you have heard of Bitcoin or the blockchain? Okay, so basically everybody, you don't even need to tell you that it's a revolutionary technology. You've been reading about it for a while. There's all sorts of promise and near infinite number of use cases for it. So I'm not going to give a big preamble. Tonight we have Cameron Schorg to talk to us a little bit about these technologies. He's been working in blockchain technology since he was in high school. He's got a couple of blockchain startups under his belt. He's done consulting work with businesses to incorporate blockchain technologies into their workflows. So he's got a lot to say, and it should be a very interesting discussion. So Cameron, take it away.
Thanks, Trent. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Clap.
Hey guys, thanks for having me in tonight. First, can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure that we're good there before I start or anything. Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate the first question Trent asked. I never know what people's level of knowledge is around Bitcoin and blockchain. Some of this might be a repeat for some of you. Hopefully, we're going to dive into some more, some things that you don't typically hear in articles and whatnot online. So he asked the question, how many people have heard of Bitcoin and blockchain? What I'd like to know is how many people here own Bitcoin or some other type of cryptocurrency? Awesome. Anyone own Dogecoin or? Yeah, nice. All right, cool. So that gives me a good base. Right on. Let's kick it off. So I'm going to start off by giving you guys a little bit brief introduction of my past. I think it will help formulate some of the other things that we go into, and then talk about what actually is money. So this seems a little bit not counterintuitive, but I think maybe off. We're talking about Bitcoin. It's a currency. Blockchain, the technology, not necessarily a currency. But before we really understand and dive into anything, I think it's really good to have a base knowledge of what the heck is money actually. It's something that's so ingrained in every part of society, but we don't really have, it's very hard to like tangibly say what it is and to point to it. So after that, we're going to go into Bitcoin and blockchain. I've got a short video I'd like to show you guys. This guy's amazing. His name's Andreas Antonopoulos. And then we're going to talk about some of the use cases and hopefully really open it up to go any which way you guys would like to take it. Throughout the whole presentation, I'd love it if you guys have a question to raise your hand during the presentation. I think it makes the most sense to go over it at the time with the right context. So feel free to raise your hand and I'll do my best to get to you as soon as I can. Cool. So in high school, I was obsessed with neuroscience. All growing up, I was reading memoirs, and I guess why I tell this story is because I had this realization in my biology class, interestingly enough, kind of learning about the brain. When a kid came up to me and was talking about Bitcoin, I had no clue what he was talking about. It's generally people's first thought, what the heck is this? I pulled it up in the bathroom on my phone, Bitcoin, and the very first 3 articles on Google were all about people using Bitcoin to buy drugs and fake IDs and stolen credit cards, guns, so on and so forth. I went back in class and I was like, yo, I'm not touching this stuff. And then I came back a week later and he had told me that he had doubled his money and that I really should take a second look at Bitcoin because it's going to change the whole world. And that night I did go home and I read the 4th article when I typed in Bitcoin on Google, and I have to say I haven't found myself able to get out of this rabbit hole that I fell down that night. Bitcoin and blockchain technology has been my absolute passion for the last 6 years. Anyone that knows me knows that this is all I talk about. I went to the University of Iowa, got really involved in a lot of educational consulting work, helping other people, other universities launch their own Bitcoin clubs and so on and so forth. Worked at Shapeshift, which is one of the largest crypto companies. They're actually located here in Denver. They've always been anonymous up until about 6 months ago. They finally came out that they're located here. And then, weirdly enough, I'm working at Dish right now, just started there, and trying to help them launch a blockchain and smart city initiative within Dish. So, cool. I have a few pictures here, and I'm going to ask you guys what you think these pictures represent. It shouldn't be too hard of a question. These are wampum belts. These are shells. And this is a really bad picture of a coin. And the question is, what are all 3 of these pictures?
Money.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. So, and I guess I missed one. Wow. All right. So the point here is that money is just a medium to express a value. It's not actually value itself. So whatever we decide that medium to be, whether it's a banknote or a shell or anything really, money is not the medium in which value is exchanged. Yeah, cool. So the 3 big things, the 3 main functions of money is a means of exchange. You have to be able to use it to buy goods and services. It needs to be unit of account. So you need to be able to say that one Xbox is worth $300, and that's the unit of account. It's represented in that way, and that's a store of value. The interesting thing to note about these 3 functions is that as money has evolved, these functions are better and worse with those mediums. So what I mean by that is that the wampum belt, for example, is a great store of value. It maybe is kind of hard to be unit of account because it's this massive, huge rock, and how on earth are you supposed to denominate things in 1/100,000th of a wampum belt, right? So that breaks down more specifically into the 6 characteristics of money. It must be fungible, so it must be interchangeable. It must be portable. It must be divisible, difficult to counterfeit, a limited supply, and durable. And again, I want to reiterate the point here that different forms of money are good and bad at some of these. I happen to think that Bitcoin hits these better than any other form of money we've had in the past, but we can easily go through and look at gold. Not very portable, a little bit tough to be divisible, very difficult to counterfeit. There is a limited supply. It is very durable, right? So I mean, you can look at this frame. Yeah.
Are you going to add the element of stability?
So this maybe goes back to more a store of value of a function of money. You could argue that, yeah, the store of value needs to be able to, right, like got to hold value from 1 year to 20 years from now. Otherwise, it's not much of a currency. Yeah. I know where you're going with that question, sorry, with that comment. I'm going to take us through a little bit of a track of kind of the different forms of money that we've seen, and then eventually, obviously, end on Bitcoin. So bartering is how things initially started out. Two people want to exchange one good for another. It's like, I have 1 cow and you have 7 wheels of cheese. Let's switch. I don't know if that's the right exchange rate, but there's a lot less certainty around that because different people are going to value things differently. It's hard to have that unit of account, as I was mentioning there. And you need to have a double coincidence of once. If I have 7 wheels of cheese and I really want to get a cow, you have the cow but you don't want cheese, there's a problem there. So that's when we ended up getting commodities. These are obviously things like oil and silver and gold. And even in places in prison, they actually use cigarettes kind of as their currency, would be seen as a commodity there. Yeah, let's see. So early forms of commodities were livestock and grain. As I have there, livestock's not very mobile, and grain is a poor store of value. Obviously, if it rains and your grain gets wet, you lose all value behind your currency there. As I mentioned, the wampum belts earlier are not very divisible. Next, we went to currency and coinage. So the very first coins that we think were minted about 7th century BC in Lydia. It was a big step in portability and fungibility. Now you could take something, a bunch of coins across the sea and trade with people in different lands, so on and so forth. But the point here is that there was started to be this centralization of power behind the currency system because not everyone can mint gold coins or coins. Only certain people can, and so that means we're only getting our money or our currency from much less people than originally in a barter system. And we'll see this progressively get more and more centralized. Then we went to banknotes. The first form of these were basically IOUs. They were initially backed by deposits, backed by gold. That obviously changed. Again, the thing here is that another big step towards centralization of our currency systems. And this is what we're all familiar with today, fiat currencies. It's not backed by gold itself. It used to be up until Nixon, and it was actually kind of like quasi backed by gold up until like 1912 or like in the early 1900s. So it's, we're kind of in a weird space right now with our money not being backed by anything at all really, other than maybe like your trust in the US government, which is debatable, right?
Backed by oil.
Yeah, backed by oil, right. Cool, so then now what we have is magic internet money, right? So that's what Bitcoin is. That's what I'm super excited about. I'm gonna show you guys a little video here. We're gonna use that video as a really good base to jump into a bunch of different use cases and try to figure out what the future looks like when some of what this guy's talking about comes true. So.
And I'm enjoying every moment of it except for the weather. But other than that, fantastic. It's so good to be at a conference about the internet because I remember my first internet conference. It was in 1992. There were about 100 people there. All of them were computer scientists or computer science students. And despite the fact that we were telling the entire world that the world was about to change, no one believed us. At least no one believed me because I was 19 years old and awkward and shy, so that wasn't working so well. But it taught me one thing. It taught me to trust my instincts because in fact it did change the world. My second book is called The Internet of Money, and the reason for that is because the technology I'm going to talk about today is about to transform the world in equal measure and will also transform the internet itself. Bitcoin, an invention created on January 3rd, 2009 by an anonymous creator, unleashed as an open source project, built by a community of volunteers, run as a peer-to-peer network, derided, laughed at, ignored for the first 5-6 years. Not so much anymore. People are beginning to pay attention, just like with the internet. Things that were previously unthinkable are now thinkable. People are beginning to notice that this is something more than what they are told. And what are they told? Drug dealers, pornographers, criminals. Guess what? That's what they said at the first conference in 1993 about the internet. They were wrong then, they're wrong now. And every time you meet someone who is a dentist who uses Bitcoin or a hairdresser who uses Bitcoin, it undermines that silly narrative. Bitcoin is a protocol, and what better stage to talk about a protocol? And the moment you start talking about Bitcoin and thinking about Bitcoin, it brings up a very difficult question. What is money? And most of us, turns out, from all of the conversations I've had with thousands of people around the world, have no idea what money is or how it works. It's one of those technologies that is so deeply embedded in our culture that it has become completely invisible to us. In fact, we don't even need to think about money unless it stops working. Some countries, they realize that it stops working, and then everybody has interesting things to say about what money is. But what is money? At its very basic level, money isn't value. In fact, you use money to get things of value, products or services, but there is no value in the money itself. And money isn't a construct of authority. We seem to think that these days, because all of our money comes from certain authoritative sources. Some guy with a crown says that this is your money, it's your money, and that's the authority it comes from. But what if money could be created without authority? What if money could be created simply through use? It turns out that what money really is a language. Money is a language that human beings created to express value to each other. As a language is one of the fundamental constructs of civilization that allows us to exceed what's known as the Dunbar number. The Dunbar number is the maximum number of individuals who can operate in a tribe on the basis of kinship, of acquaintance. But if you want two tribes to work together, you need some common bond. And these bonds have included culture, language, religion, and yes, money, a fundamental construct that allows us to exceed the scale of a single tribe and engage in commerce with others on a greater scale. And as our money has evolved, it has been able to evolve its scale to allow us to collaborate and engage in commerce on a greater level. But money is also, ironically, a system of control, because controlling money confers great power to those who control it. And as a result, kings and governments have always held a very tight control over money, pretty much like they used to hold over religion for pretty much the same reasons. And now that has changed. On January 3rd, 2009, the world changed because some person created a peer-to-peer protocol, a flat network with no servers, all clients, that is able to express money as a content type. As internet professionals, you may understand what I mean when I say money as a content type. Money that is expressed purely as data, that can be transmitted using any communication medium that can convey information. A Bitcoin transaction doesn't need to be transmitted over the Bitcoin network, although that's a convenient way to do it. You could encode it in Skype emojis. You could write it up and put it in a Craigslist ad. You could post it on Facebook in the background of a picture of kittens playing with yarn. Money as pure information on an open network that is simultaneously uncensorable, open to anyone, neutral, and global. There are no borders on this new technology, just like there are no borders on the internet. Everyone can access it because it is not a product. It is not a company. You do not need to register for an account. You simply download the client. And a Bitcoin client is very much like a web browser. It is the user interface that speaks the protocol to other Bitcoin clients out there. And as soon as you download that one application, you can join a global economy. And that global economy is open to anyone of any race, religion, creed, ethnicity, age, anywhere in the world. For most people, this concept hasn't yet quite sunk in. The children born today will not know a world in which banks exist. They will not know a world in which paper money exists any more than many of the young people in our industry today have no idea what the world used to look like before the internet. How many of you here remember libraries and looking up reference cards? Okay, you're over 40, so am I. Gotcha. But the children born today will never drive a car. They'll never have a world without the internet, and they also will never know a world where banks control money, where money is issued only by kings, only by nation states. Money will be an integral protocol of the internet, a content type that can be transmitted by anyone, anywhere. But that's not enough. Let's make it more fun. Every form of money until today has to have a person behind it. Money can only be owned and managed by people, or people together forming an association, a legal fiction called a corporation. Not with Bitcoin, it's a protocol. Autonomous agents can own and manage money themselves. No people required. Imagine a corporation with no directors, no shareholders, no employees, running entirely based on scripted learning, machine learning, or maybe just a few simple heuristic rules that operates autonomously of any human action and can manage budgets in the amounts of billions of dollars. Now, at this point in the audience, we have a split. Some people are thinking, oh no, that sounds terrible. What if it's a virus? What if it's intelligent ransomware that self-propagates and buys Amazon Web Service systems so that it can grow when it's successful? What if it starts running A/B testing on itself by hiring programmers to make itself better? Yeah, all of that's going to happen. But what if it's a charity? What if it's an intelligent charity that can detect the emergence of a natural disaster and automatically and instantaneously divert large funds directly to the people most in need without human intervention? And unlike most charities today, 100% of the funds donated go to those in need. The world is about to change. Self-driving cars? How about self-owning cars? Cars that are not owned by a corporation, cars that are a corporation, that pay for their electricity or gas, maintenance and leasing fees by giving rides to human beings who pay them in cryptocurrencies. Imagine software such as intelligent articles that propagate across the internet as content and expand their reach because people read them, and as a result they're able to buy more hosting services so they can expand their reach. This is not your grandparents' money. It's not your parents' money. This is money that is fully programmable, scriptable, that has capabilities that can be finely tuned. You can specify who can access it and when, how it can be dispersed. A whole new field has opened up, which is now called smart contracts. This system allows people to program the behavior of entire systems that can also manage money. And money is such a narrow word to describe this, because we use things that kind of look like money all the time but aren't really money. What about loyalty points, tokens, subway cards, airline miles? What about expression of a fan of Justin Bieber with full access to the catalog of music as a token? What about all of the other brands that can be turned into tokens and made into a global exchangeable system directly on the internet through this internet protocol? January 3rd, 2009, the world changed. Since then, more than 1,000 other cryptocurrencies have been created using the same recipe, almost all of them open source, and they're expanding in all directions, exploring every possible niche of this ecosystem, every tiny variation in capabilities and features, creating new markets which are raising funds for thousands of startups around the world. Thousands of engineers, software engineers, developers are training to use this new technology. The internet itself is changing very rapidly. Now we have autonomous agents that are using money on the internet, and these are, in many cases, beyond the controls of any jurisdiction. What are the large corporations going to do with this new magical, open, decentralized, neutral, borderless, censorship-resistant network? They're going to say, great, we'd like that, but could you take out the open, decentralized, borderless, neutral, censorship-resistant properties and package it with an SLA, a 12-month license, and control? Control for us. They will take the internet and they will make intranets. They will make closed gardens of boring, stale content that is fundamentally insecure, that sits in the backyards of corporations, adding a tiny bit of value, but outside of the participation of the global community, insulated from the wave of innovation that is happening all around us. They will create these intranets, they will claim victory, they will turn around and they will say, we invented blockchain. And they will be wrong, and they will fail. Because the real principle, the real exciting thing about this technology, it's not the blockchain, which is a database artifact that is created out of this protocol. It is the ability to achieve distributed consensus among parties that don't trust each other across great distances without any central party, without any authority, without any intermediary. And that consensus from the outside looks chaotic, it looks messy, it looks weird. Well, everyone in this room already knows something that is open, flat, weird, and is not understood by corporations. The internet. We already did it once, we're going to do it again. And this time, we're going to bring the entire world with us. In the background of this grand story, there's another story that's playing out. After 25 years of the internet, it still takes 3 to 5 days to send money from here to a country that's not in Europe. It will still cost you 30, 40 US dollars to send money. And that's only if the country you're sending it to isn't a poor country, in which case it will cost far more and take far longer. A giant network of centralized, closed, corrupt systems that are sucking money out of the poorest people on this planet. In 2017, 2.5 billion people do not have access to banking. That means they have zero access to banking, cash-based only, and that's only counting heads of household. Not their spouses, not their children. Clearly they don't matter. That's according to the International Monetary Bank. Now, imagine what happens if you bring banking to an app, to a $20 Android, to everyone who has a smartphone. 3.5 to 4 billion people are on the internet today. Just over 1 billion people of those have banking, have full access to financial services. We're going to bring it to the other 6 billion fast. And this is going to change the world faster than the spread of cell phones. Imagine a $20 Android landing in a village in Kenya, and it's no longer just a communications device. It's a bank. Not a bank account, a bank. It can wire and receive funds from anywhere in the world. It can do lending or receive lending for a mortgage, to buy seeds for a field, to bring disaster relief. It can internationally connect every person on this planet, and we can do this within the next 10 years. The world will radically transform when you bring the capability of a broad economic inclusion to everyone in this world. Now, you would think that banks want to do this. you'd be wrong. It's not really profitable serving people who have little money, little connectivity, no access to ID in oppressed countries with terrible governments. Also, in most of those countries, the banks are criminals. They are criminal organizations, or really quite indistinguishable from the local mob. So how do we fix that? Up to now, the approach for all of these technologies, whether it was PayPal or any of the other technologies we've seen emerge in financial technology very, very slowly, was to carefully and politely ask for permission. Bitcoin is not asking for permission. We forgot to do that. And so we will proceed in banking the entire world without asking for anyone's permission. This protocol is now spreading. And if this one gets shut down, a 14-year-old with a copy of my book can rebuild it in a weekend in any programming language and launch it again with its new name. And again, and again, and again, until we succeed. The world is now connected. Finance is now an application, and money is a content type. Welcome to our new planet. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. Well, hopefully that wasn't too long for you guys. I've seen that video about 15 times, and every single time I watch it, I kind of get goosebumps. Yeah. Andreas Antonopoulos, his name. Yeah. He basically does what I'd prefer to do for a career. He travels around the world, similar to Thomas, speaking about his passion of technology. He's very passionate about, that being Bitcoin. So hopefully kind of opened up your guys' minds a little bit as far as like some of the potential applications of Bitcoin and blockchain. He focused a lot on Bitcoin, and I think to me still the most exciting use case of blockchain technology is Bitcoin. It's the money application of blockchain technology that I think has the power to be the most transformative. Primary reason for that is that while another application of blockchain might be very impactful, money is at the root of absolutely everything. And so if we change that, for the first time really in a very fundamental way in thousands of years, we're going to see a lot more change than if we change a different construct. So again, money is digital, or Bitcoin is an online digital currency. There's no need for middlemen like banks. So I can send one Bitcoin from myself to my friend in Australia on a Saturday night bank holiday, and it gets there in a matter of seconds for virtually no money. That's pretty amazing when you think about the fact that right now I can connect to anyone in the world via Skype, but if I want to send money to my friend, $50 for a birthday gift, it might take 3, 5, 7 days depending on what jurisdictions they're in and if we're on a business day or not. It's universal currency, so Bitcoin in China is the same as the Bitcoin in the United States, and it is powered by blockchain technology. So Bitcoin is merely an application that exists on top of a blockchain, and there are many other use cases for blockchain technology than Bitcoin itself. So this is just, I'm not going to sit here and go through all this, but I just want visually you guys to see this is what our current financial system looks like, and it's actually way more complex even in the middle here than this. There's the, I'm just not even going to it, but it's very complex. There's like 20 more steps in here. So this is what it looks like though right after, as I explained. Anyone, anywhere, in a matter of seconds. So what actually is blockchain technology then? Or what is blockchain? Blockchain is a database. It is a database innovation that maintains a continuously growing list of records. I normally tell this story. It was popularized by this lady named Galia Bernazzi, and she explains that blockchain is like a magical book in the sense that I own a book and everyone else owns a copy of that book. Anytime I go and make a change to that book, it's immediately propagated to every single other person that owns a copy of the book. And then every 10 minutes or so, we all get together and decide if we want basically to ink that page in history forever. Once we do so, it is set. You can imagine like the words, instead of being words in a book, they are transactions or a list of transactions. And then the big thing here is that I own a copy of the book. I can go out and burn it, as 20 of my friends can go out and burn the copy, but as long as one copy of that book exists, the book lives on, so to speak. And that's similar to blockchain, and that's how it works, and what a lot of its power comes from, is in the fact that many people own a copy or a record of who owns what Bitcoin, essentially. And there's no way to tamper with that unless you can somehow destroy every single copy of that Bitcoin blockchain. So the network is maintained by miners. I know that might be a little bit of a confusing word. Depending on how much you guys want to go into it, we can pop into it later. That's a pretty computer science heavy discussion of how that actually works. And Bitcoin blockchain is secured by 500 supercomputers. So I always get the question all right, this is all online digital currency. Why can't some hacker just go out there and print more money or steal my account or something like that? This blockchain network that I'm talking about, this database, there are the equivalent of 500 of the world's supercomputers maintaining the integrity of that system at any given point. And so the only way to go out and truly hack the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, is to somehow overpower 500 of the world's supercomputers. If you have a way to do that, I'd love to talk to you after. I also think that the US government might be really interested to talk to you, as would a lot of other governments, I guess. But cool, and then just reiterate here again, Bitcoin is an application on top of blockchain technology. So this kind of just compares things of a current database system. It is pretty much all systems we have now are very centralized. So most of the internet exists on an Amazon Web Service server, which means Amazon pretty much controls a lot of the internet, or they're in charge of keeping it up. And what's different about blockchain is that every single person that has a copy of the blockchain is contributing to this system, rather than it coming from one area. This is really important when we talk about data. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Equifax and a lot of these big data breaches. A problem with a centralized server, and highlighted very well in this picture, is that if all the data is sitting right here, it gives a very apparent attack vector, basically, for any hacker to go after this honeypot. Whereas if all the data or money or value is stored in the system, more like the picture there on your guys' right, there is no one central point of failure, and compromising one specific node isn't going to compromise the entire system. So, in a lot of ways, a distributed and decentralized model makes a lot more sense, and is inherently, by design, more secure as well. So Andreas might have made the realization there in the video, but the truth of the matter is that everything in the future that can be tokenized will be tokenized. And the blockchain will be the infrastructure for the future, what we've been imagining. What I mean by that is a lot of these other exponential technologies, so IoT, space travel, robotics, genomics, these are all things that are going to be very directly impacted by blockchain. And I think blockchain will actually be the infrastructure level that allows a lot of those systems to come to fruition in the way that we're imagining them coming to fruition. So Bitcoin, again, is tokenization of money, but what else can we tokenize? Really anything, again, but these are just a few of them down at the bottom. So digital rights management, Spotify is actually has a blockchain team. They're focusing on trying to make it more secure as far as paying, as far as transfer of ownership of songs. Yep. No, it's all right. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah, so the way that it exists right now is that all of our health records are sitting in one central honeypot. In the future systems that we're imagining, what a lot of startups are working on is that you will actually own your health data. It will exist on your own device, your own computer, your own file. No one else has access to that data unless you grant them access to that. So the difference there is that because you own your own data, there is no central point where you can go and get access to like 1 million people's health records. You can, if someone is targeting you specifically, they may be able to break in and get your health information. But the probability of someone targeting you specifically, unless you're like a president or a celebrity or something like that for your data, is pretty low. They're going after this because it's much better vector to go after. So something that's kind of interesting that obviously all this stuff going on with Facebook right now and the data breaches, and Facebook owns all of our data, all of our interaction, information. And something that I think would be really interesting that will eventually happen is a model like Facebook. So all the same services, the social collaboration platform, but instead of all that data being owned by Facebook, all that data is actually still owned by us. And these are things that have not previously been possible without the correct infrastructure level, but we now have the infrastructure level in blockchain technologies. So again, here with Uber, so Uber owns this ride. They own the ride-sharing ecosystem, or at least a pretty big part of it. If we can somehow create this open-sourced software that allows people like drivers and riders to match with each other, we don't need Uber to sit in the middle of us. We can instead exchange value, $10 of my time for one ride from here to there, without needing Uber to sit in the middle of it. And the theme really with a lot of these is disintermediation. So a lot of these structures that we have people sitting in the middle, whether it be Uber or Facebook or your health company, we are going to disintermediate those people and allow value exchange to be much more from one person to the other, one entity to the other entity, without the inefficiency of having a middleman in between. Yeah.
In the case of Uber, that middleman offers a security value added. So those functions would still be necessary for to replace something like Uber.
Sure. Security in the sense that like they're doing background checks on drivers, or security in what?
Drivers and riders.
Sure.
From both. So there's this reputation management function, and those also can be decentralized as well. With the distributed.
Right. Yeah, those can be disintermediated as well. We have an app on Uber that says you're going to be a driver. It asks you for your driver's license, so on and so forth. They're going to do a background check on you. There's no reason why that platform, that user interface, can't be owned by the collective instead. That there's still maybe the background check done by another agency, but that authorization can be like ported into the same system, right? So I don't see that being preventing anything. What's one cool thing about what you talked about is reputation. Right now we have reputation in very siloed places. So you have your eBay reputation, you have reputation on Uber, reputation on Amazon, but they don't talk or share with each other because they're different companies. But I think there's really no reason why, if I'm an extremely good Uber driver and I have good manners and I'm sociable and whatnot, why that reputation doesn't also track when I decide I want to rent out my house for the night. Or when I want to go on eBay and sell something, why that reputation of being a good, honest person doesn't transfer as well. So there are a lot of like blockchain projects working on the reputation space, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things work when we can transfer reputation from one stage to the other.
Yeah, I wonder if it's, you're talking about replacing Uber. Uber's a service. There's those kind of ones that go direct, do-it-yourself kind of people. But maybe there's also a place for a service people don't necessarily want to or have, means, I don't know, to do it directly, like, the do-it-yourself home model, home remake, versus having somebody else come in and remake your house for you. I wonder if there would be different layers then possible within that. You still have your service. You could do it yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah, right. I imagine a future where we have the same level of service from Facebook or Uber, but instead of it being owned by this big conglomerate company, it's instead owned by all the users that participate in that model instead.
Yeah, some of these other blockchain applications, energy intensive as the Bitcoin mining.
So that depends. The Bitcoin, blockchain technology, there can be different currencies that exist on top of any given blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain is very intensive energy-wise to secure it. So these 500 supercomputers, the reason why it's very high energy intensive is because you have 500 supercomputers all securing the Bitcoin blockchain. There are a lot of other what's called consensus mechanisms. So basically the way that we all agree that the blockchain is true. There are a lot of other consensus mechanisms that don't use as much energy. The biggest one there is called proof of stake. So right now, Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency in the world. They right now are run on a similar system to Bitcoin, which is called proof of work. So that's why it's energy intensive. You prove that you're doing something. Whereas in proof of stake, it's just a little bit different of a model and a consensus mechanism that uses significantly less energy. So most of these other applications would not be energy intensive. They would exist on something like the Ethereum blockchain, which is slowly transitioning from a proof of work model to a proof of stake model. So, yeah. Anyone? Go ahead.
Well, I'm very confused about security. Blockchain is touted as being very secure, but I've read reports in the newspapers about Bitcoin being hacked, a certain amount of money being stolen, etc. So how can we really trust the blockchain technology?
Sure. So it's not the blockchain itself or Bitcoin itself that has been hacked. It is a third-party application on top that has been hacked or compromised. So the Bitcoin blockchain itself has never been compromised in the 10 plus years, or just under 10 years now that it's been out. What has been compromised are these exchanges that exist on top of the blockchain. It's also a reason why I always tell people to use like Coinbase, which is the largest crypto company, to buy their first Bitcoin. But as soon as they have more than $500 of it, take their money off of Coinbase, because Coinbase is one of these third parties that is, again, fundamentally susceptible to being hacked. Coinbase owns all of your Bitcoin. They're essentially a neo-bank. They own your Bitcoin, but they don't have to own your Bitcoin. You are able to take control of your Bitcoin and own what's called your private keys, which basically means the ownership of the Bitcoin. So I do foresee that there being a lot more of these hacks, but there is a way to avoid them, and that's in taking responsibility and controlling your own Bitcoin rather than outsourcing that to a third party.
What is the energy cost of producing one new Bitcoin?
It's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that. I do know it is very, very intensive. This is a critique that people in Bitcoin get quite a bit. I do know that there was some stats saying the amount of money that's used to secure the Bitcoin network is the equivalent of these 3 countries combined or something like that. The 2 points I always go off of there is the US dollar is a lot more intensive to maintain than Bitcoin, even with all things considered. What I mean by that is think of the hundreds of thousands of bank employees that we have. With Bitcoin, you don't need any of those. Think about the amount of cars trucking money from one location to another. Think about the input costs of the metal, the paper. All those things are a lot higher than you'd expect. I don't have the exact numbers, but I'd love to refer you to some studies that have been done on comparing the model and the costs of maintaining the US dollar versus maintaining Bitcoin. It's significantly less. The other main point to keep in mind there is that over 70% of the energy used on Bitcoin mining is renewable energy. So there's a lot of actually push, primarily because renewable energy can be cheaper in certain areas. And what's actually interesting to see, again, all these exponential technologies, as I was talking about AI and genomics and Bitcoin blockchain being one of those, they're accelerating each other. And so what we see here is that the Bitcoin blockchain space is accelerating a lot of innovation in the renewable energy space as well, because energy is the main input cost to get Bitcoin. And so they are laser focused on trying to improve efficiency and innovate in that space.
Could you cite your sources for that, please? The renewable energy part.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to after. Yeah. I've got a whole list of yeah.
Could you go back to the slide that lists Uber, please?
Sure.
One thing I'm seeing, or not seeing, as it were, China, where everything you've listed up there, there's a different version of it, there's a different means for interacting with it, and there's a whole different system of control.
Sure.
How do you see that reconciling, given the fact that as we move more simply towards an entirely separated internet?
Yeah, that's interesting, right, to see played out in the past. I do know that China has come down pretty harsh on Bitcoin. They banned, first the exchanges, then the mining operations. What I do know is what's interesting to see is the amount of China has a lot of capital restrictions on how much money you can pull out of China. What's interesting to see is the activity on these other exchanges coming from China spike like crazy whenever the government comes out and makes these restrictions. I do think the government is making it a lot more difficult for some of these systems to take off in China. We have been somewhat lucky in the United States for the government to be a little less hands-on so far. As far as like making different, internets and whatnot, I don't necessarily think that Bitcoin itself is going to be the number one, the only one. There will be hundreds of thousands of tokens and cryptocurrencies out there, and if people in China want to use a different currency, they can. There will still be interoperability between their currency and being able to quickly exchange it into another currency. It's one thing that's great about cryptocurrencies, that you can't really control it, as I was mentioning, like the spikes, or there was crazy spikes when the government came in and did restrictions, because they can't shut off the internet, right? It's very, very, very difficult to restrict internet. So unless you just, yeah.
So I have.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll call on someone else and come back to you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I see you've got solar energy up there. I'm just curious, if you could just give me just a sentence or two what that means.
Sure. So right now, the utility companies sit in between. They're kind of this middleman, I guess, between the energy producers and the energy consumers, if you're going to call them that. I think Colorado might have just recently passed a law, but in certain places, if I produce a bunch of energy on top of my roof via solar power, I cannot sell it to the person next door, even though my utility line runs right next to him. And that's primarily because there's these monopolies through the utility companies. What's interesting is that blockchain has a potential to essentially create the infrastructure level for a distributed energy system. So they provide the ability to exchange value. You can almost think of it as one solar coin being equal to 1 kilowatt hour of energy, and that now becomes a tradable asset. Whereas before we were just looking at the middleman utility companies to tell us the price. With these cryptocurrencies and the tokenization of 1 kilowatt hour of energy, it introduces like fair market or market price discovery, and some other things there that wouldn't be able.
Well, you still need like the energy network to transfer that.
Sure, you would still need the utility lines. The utility companies don't own those lines; they're actually owned by government essentially, and they license them out. So it wouldn't eliminate the government from owning those utility lines, but it would eliminate one of the middlemen being a utility company from the middle. It kind of goes back to like the Uber and the Facebook again, is that we can have the same level of service without the middleman in between. Right now, a lot of the energy prices that we see are a lot higher than the natural cost, and that's because you have this middleman in between. And what there is, this is more of a far out futurist prediction, right? But there's ways you can crowd fund things with Bitcoin very interestingly, or with cryptocurrencies that you weren't able to before. So even in the sense that right now the government owns these utility lines, there is a future where collectively as a city we crowdfund the development of new utility lines or whatever, and we collectively all own access to that. Yeah.
Related to the China question, did the Federal Reserve get all mad and release the federal government loan to shut us down?
They are 100% paying attention to this. Honestly, I think publicly they're saying one thing and privately they're saying another thing, right? So they have been pretty lax about things so far. Ultimately, I hope that they let innovation happen before they come in and get too hands-on. They did this with the internet, and it seemed to work well. America still dominated kind of after the internet came out. The government definitely can come in and try to shut everything down. Again, they won't be able to because they can't shut the internet down. So we would still technically have access to it. That being said, they can make it very, very, very difficult. And let's say you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life if you own Bitcoin. It's going to prevent a lot of people from getting involved, but it won't stop it on a global level. And there are countries that are going to be more progressive, and ultimately, dynasties rise and fall. So if the United States decides to do that, then another country will take power. And don't mistake, the U.S. government will fight like hell, to prevent this from happening eventually. I don't think they're there yet. They don't quite understand exactly how impactful this is going to be.
I was going to say the same thing. Like another country will, if it's banned here, some other country will benefit from the technology.
Right.
So
Exactly.
there's like this sort of mutually assured destruction.
Yeah. And yeah, the cat's out of the bag, right? As he mentioned, any 14, 15-year-old anywhere around the world can go and launch an instance of Bitcoin in a matter of like a few hours again. So even if they were able to, it's not possible on the global scale.
So we won't have to pay taxes?
That's not necessarily true, because they can still, you still work, you still live here in the United States, whatever, so they can still come and arrest you, right?
So I have a couple of questions about
Sure.
the miner.
Yeah.
So is your supercomputer really a euphemism for the computers that the miners own? And can I become a miner and make money, and how would I make money if I became a miner?
Sure. So the 500 supercomputers is the equivalent of the amount of computing power that there's actually, like, I think it's between 6,000 and 11,000. It fluctuates all the time, but there's basically 6,000 to 11,000 of these computers. They're owned by individuals, by corporations, by whoever that is securing this. When I say 500 supercomputers, that's the equivalent of the computational power of all these other computers. You can become a miner if you want, pretty easily. You'd have to download a full copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. Assuming that your computer has enough storage on it, you are probably not going to. You will not make any money if you're mining Bitcoin from your personal computer or anything like that. It's something that requires, again, people have. There are I think one of the companies just IPO'd, Bitmain, for a few $1 billion. They're big. You compete against those guys, so they obviously have things zoned in. Their energy costs are a lot lower than your energy costs. But yeah, I mean, you can still mine Bitcoin.
And could I get venture capital money to form a mining company and put up the computers?
100%. There are people
How
do
do
that.
how do I get paid as a miner?
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
probability thing that always shrinks down.
So
it has to be tied in, and there's probability that your work won't be paid.
So this is where game theory comes in to effect. In order to incentivize all these miners for securing the entire network, the network essentially pays them Bitcoin to do so. So this is kind of what the term mining comes from. You can think of it like someone mining gold, and you're striking away and all this, for your efforts, you get a little piece of gold. In the same way with Bitcoin, I'm using my computational power to secure the network, and in return, I'm getting some Bitcoin. That is happening at a rate of 12.5 Bitcoin every 10 minutes is like put into circulation, essentially. It's much different than the way the U.S. government puts money into circulation, in which basically... What's that? 12.5 Bitcoin, that's correct. Yeah. Yep. So with Bitcoin being $3,500, it's 40, 50 grand, whatever. Per every 12.5 minutes, or sorry, every 10 minutes that's coming online or into circulation.
So if I wanted to calculate a break-even point, could I figure that out with information on the internet?
You could calculate the break-even point at this exact moment right now.
Right.
You would not know the break-even point tomorrow, or in a week from now, or a month from now, and the reason for that is because the difficulty to secure the network is forever changing. So what's really cool about the monetary policy built into Bitcoin is essentially, okay, so the monetary policy for the U.S. government is they can kind of print money willy-nilly, right? With Bitcoin, it's every 10 minutes, 12.5 Bitcoin is put into circulation, and there is a difficulty in order to get that. So what happens is these 6,000 computers all around the world are all competing to secure the network, and if one, this is where it gets kind of computer science. I'm trying to like layman terms it. You have 6,000 computers. They're all trying to solve a difficult math problem. Whichever computer solves a difficult math problem is the one that's rewarded the 12.5 Bitcoin. So every 10 minutes, everyone restarts that race. And everyone's trying to solve it. 10 minutes later, someone finally solves it. They get the 12.5 Bitcoin, and everyone restarts from square one. So that's why if you have more computational power, your essentially luck or your chances of finding the correct answer is increased. So that's why you have these people pooling together, where they're pooling their resources together, to make sure that they at least get some payout, at a somewhat regular basis.
So you're saying if I started a company, I may never get any return?
So
because I'm competing against all
right.
these other
So
guys.
the difficulty rate, right? Like let's say right now it takes one Mac computer to solve this math problem. As more computers come online and solve that same math problem, the Bitcoin essentially algorithm readjusts every 2 weeks to make that algorithm as difficult as it needs to be, so people are only solving the math problem every 10 minutes. So technically you can solve the problem in 9 minutes or 2 minutes or 12 minutes, but it's about happening every 10 minutes. Every 2 weeks, the Bitcoin system automatically readjusts to essentially make supply and demand in equilibrium. So that's kind of where I was going with the monetary policies. The government is willy-nilly. With Bitcoin, it's baked in, and you know that every 2 weeks the system is going to readjust to be comparable to the hashing power, the computation power that's on the network. Yeah.
I've heard that there's a finite number of Bitcoin that can eventually be produced. So
Yep.
it really has a built-in deflationary aspect.
Yep.
Once you get there.
Right. Yeah, there's 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be in existence. Right now, we're at, I think, like 17 million or 16 million Bitcoin that are in existence. We will reach the 21 million Bitcoin at about the year 2140 is kind of the rough estimates. Again, we don't know the exact date because it has to do with that the difficulty again. But yeah, it is deflationary in that nature, which is one of the main benefits of it, compared to U.S. dollar, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other day I was listening to George Gilder speak. Have you ever heard of him?
I have not.
So he was speaking. His speech is about life after Google, what it'll be like, and he ended up talking about Bitcoin and blockchain quite a bit, and he used the word cryptocosm, and I was wondering if you could define that. I didn't understand really what he was saying. What does that word mean, cryptocosm? And also, he basically said that the value that's created now and what we have now is just the accounting part. It isn't, the world isn't ready yet to convert the currency to Bitcoin or to, into a blockchain format. Do you agree with that, or did I hear what he was saying? Oh, I guess you don't really listen.
Sure. So cryptocosm, what context is he talking about? Is he just talking about like this paradigm shift that we're kind of undergoing?
Yeah,
is that
in the crypto, in the currency world.
Sure. So maybe, my guess is he's talking that it's not just like the currency application of blockchain technology. There are all these other applications. And on this page, I'm not sure if you can see this at top, but it says, this is where Bitcoin lives, the currencies, but there are all these other applications of blockchain technology as well. They range as far as like messaging applications, all the way to lending protocols, Internet of Things, supply chain, gambling, and even things like what we talked about, like Airbnb and Uber and Facebook and some of those things that all are going to be touched by blockchain technology. I believe that blockchain technology will be as transformative as the internet was, if not more. And the main piece there is that blockchain technology will touch almost every single industry in the same way that the internet touched every single industry.
But I guess the question is, what will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, where people start, changing their gold or their currency into, into this? Because they're not really doing it now. They're doing it, almost as a
as a hedge or something against.
Yeah, a hedge, right.
A few bank failures.
Yeah, right.
Could you talk about maybe a different way to think about that? There's a lot of use cases up there.
Mm-hmm.
But could you talk about maybe some success stories?
Sure. Yeah. I can roll into that. So I think it won't be. Everyone talks about the killer app. What's the killer app of blockchain? There is no killer app of blockchain. The killer app is usability of all these different things. Right now, we're building infrastructure. And I don't think I have the infographic here, but there's a really cool picture I saw the other day talking about the amount of money that's going into all these different projects, and most of the money is going into infrastructure projects. Where we are right now, if you wanted to look at the scale of things, if you compare it to the internet, we're like internet in 1992, 1993. So not that many people knew about the internet in 93, but in the same way that not that many people, actually I would probably argue more people know about Bitcoin now than maybe knew about internet in 1992. But as far as like the adoption curve and actually using it and the infrastructure being ready for this, the mass of people, we're like at 1992, 1993. Okay. So a lot of like the difficulties of dealing with Bitcoin right now, like you've got to, if you want to secure your own Bitcoin, you've got to write down this 12-word, pass backup phrase, and these are things that are like that we're used to, right? It's like download an app, I can log in, if I lose my login, I can click forgot my password. Those are usability designs that need to come to Bitcoin in order for it to take off in the way that it eventually will. It's just not there yet. It's just not very it's not very usable yet, to be honest. And so some of the success cases that we talked about, though, again, I think we're very, very lucky in the United States. We have access to Visa and MasterCard and all these modern financial tools, but we are 5%. You know, the majority of the world, the rest of 95% of the world, does not have the same access to financial tools that we do. And so we see uptake of the money application of blockchain technology, so Bitcoin, having a lot more success in places like Argentina and Brazil and in remittance markets where people are sending money back home to different countries that are basically utilizing a lot of those core benefits of Bitcoin. We have a lot bigger hurdle to overcome in the United States, again, because our financial system is pretty good. Like, it's much better than the rest of the world. There's a long way to go and a lot to improve there, but yeah. And maybe some other success stories, I guess, of Bitcoin. There is 40 to 50 million people that own Bitcoin, some piece of Bitcoin. It's actually a pretty large number, really. There are, what I always point to, everyone wants to talk about the price, and they say, Bitcoin's dead, Bitcoin's dead. For one, there's a site called bitcoinobituaries.com. It's hilarious because it is essentially headlines from every single news publication across the world claiming Bitcoin is dead, starting from 2009. And it is thousands and thousands of headlines of saying Bitcoin's dead, basically just because the price crashed. The price has been pretty much crashing. We're at an 85% retracement from the all-time highs of Bitcoin right now. I guess where I was going at with this, though, is that price is not a very good metric to pay attention to if we want to look at how this technology is coming into fruition. Better things to pay attention to is what does the developer communities look like, how much money is being invested in these technologies, and those things are all up and up, basically.
Yeah, but that gets confusing because blockchain is 15 or so many different types of technologies, and there's so many crypto coins.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any indication that Bitcoin is going to be successful long term?
Sure. I would say the fact that Bitcoin has been here already for 10 years and is a $200+ billion market cap. Well, I guess maybe it's 150 right now. Yeah, but it was up to several $100 billion is testament in of itself that it has been a success already. Whether Bitcoin is the one that ultimately provides all the appropriate usability design, I don't know that answer, but it has proven that cryptocurrencies are wanted, that people value them, and that's here to stay. So I would say the fact that Bitcoin has been, as again, there's $200 billion there. If you can figure out how to hack the Bitcoin blockchain, you have access to $200 billion. It hasn't been hacked yet. So that in of itself is a big success. The fact there's 40, 50 million people that own a piece of Bitcoin is a success. It's very easy for us to be like, wow, this is really taking forever. It's been out for 10 years. Why are we not anywhere yet? Why is every single Starbucks not accept Bitcoin? The caveat to that is they're about to actually. Starbucks is actually about to start playing with Bitcoin. But really, things are moving as fast as the internet was. The internet was around in the 60s. We didn't have consumer applications of it really until late 90s. So we're at year 10 right now. Yeah.
Can Bitcoin get off of proof of work? Is there any way can it do that? Can it shift its fundamental algorithm?
Yeah, so hypothetically speaking, Bitcoin, in the same way that Ethereum can change its consensus mechanism, Bitcoin can do that as well. I don't think that it ever will. And this kind of goes into the use case of money. The use case of Bitcoin is a store of value and a means of exchange. And for that, I think having a proof of work consensus mechanism, so making people prove, that they're putting in energy to secure the system, is a preferred method versus proof of stake. And primarily because if Bitcoin is the one that takes off as the store of value coin or the store of value application, its market cap will be, comparable to gold, right? Several $1 trillion. And I think proof of work is a lot better way to secure that system than something, than us trading an hour of my time over Uber kind of thing. But I mean, that's up for debate, right? People in the space are arguing back and forth as well. No, I think proof of stake's better. No, proof of work's better. my personal opinion is that proof of work is the best. But for this use case,
There's also proof of stake.
proof of stake, yeah, right, and that's
You can do 100,000 transactions a second.
Yep. Yeah, there are many different consensus mechanisms.
And if you come up with your own, you can always start your own pool.
Yeah, you can always start your own chain. Yeah, Thomas.
Cameron, can you give us a few tidbits of what you would think the Bitcoin network will look like 10 years from now?
Sure. I think Andres hit it on its head, but children born today will not know a world in which bank accounts exist. In the same way that I've never used a fax machine in my life. I don't think kids aren't going to have to, imagine telling right now it's like, you can't get a bank account until you're like 16 or something like that, unless your parents are on it. I can't imagine telling a 10-year-old in 10 years that he can't, play some video game or trade with someone, one of his friends somewhere around the world that he met on a gaming site. He's got to be 16 first to trade value there. So I think bank accounts are going to be look much different. Every single person will be able to be their own bank. The usability will be there for that to happen. I would love to see significant less power go to the government because Bitcoin technology has taken off. The government right now has ultimate power over us because they have control of the money. If you eliminate control of the money, you eliminate their ability to pay an army and to enforce taxation and a lot of other things. I'm really excited about that use case of Bitcoin, and I think 10 years might be a little too aggressive, but I would say in the 10 to 20 year time frame, we're going to see significantly less power attributed to certain governments, than we currently have now, and that is a fundamental, change, a big paradigm shift, I think.
I read that American Express is using Ripple for undeveloped countries. Is this a good time to buy Ripple?
Ripple is a coin that a lot of people outside of this space think is a great investment, want to get into. Ripple has created very good financial technology, but there is an extremely good argument to say that Ripple is not actually a blockchain technology. And Ripple is a lot more centralized than a lot of these other providers. So they are maybe providing some value to the net, to the international banking system. But I would say definitely do your research on Ripple because a lot of people in the space aren't a fan of Ripple.
Is there a Bitcoin or a currency that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, my tried and true is Bitcoin. So I'm invested in a lot of these other applications, and I'm always looking at new ones every single day, pretty much. But still, again, my most exciting application of this technology is Bitcoin itself. Some of the other areas that I'm super interested in are identity management, so the ability to essentially tokenize your citizenship and to be a citizen of different entities based on what you decide as your attributables. I mean, honestly, it's kind of like the stock market, right? You can go in any which way. So if you're really interested in music, then maybe a digital rights management platform is a good coin for you to buy, so you can stay involved in that. If you're really interested in solar energy or energy, then maybe that's a good coin for you to buy. Or pharmaceuticals, or you can go any which way. So it's just more of a personal preference at that point. Yeah.
And like in investing, when you look at an investment, you say, what can people get rid of? They can get rid of their stocks, they can get rid of their bonds, but it's hard for them to get rid of their real estate because they have to have a place to live, a roof over their head. What about Bitcoin and blockchain? Is this something they can easily get rid of, or is this something they're going to have to go along with?
Sure. Yeah, so you're basically asking about liquidity. There's
no, I'm really asking about as a future investment. Is this going to be something you can just get rid of?
Get rid of as far as like change it into something else, or
not use it, like you get rid of your stocks, you just sell your stocks.
Yep. In the same way with Bitcoin, I can sell all my Bitcoin in like a few minutes if I wanted to, right? It's very interchangeable from that perspective. There is several $1 billion of Bitcoin traded every day, so that although it's not comparable to the stock market yet, the total market cap of Bitcoin isn't quite there yet either. So there is lots of liquidity. You can go in and out of Bitcoin or a lot of these other currencies very easily. you asked about real estate, which is actually a really interesting use case of blockchain technology, primarily because we can take the ownership of a house and represent that in a token, and then we can take that token and divide it up amongst 100 people. So what I'm getting at here is, imagine a condo development. Previously, you have like 6 investors. They're all going in on that condo development, and it's very illiquid for them to get out of the deal. Once they've purchased it and they're developing it, it might take them 5, 6, 10 years to get out of it. What's cool about the ability to tokenize the ownership of that is I have instant liquidity. As soon as I have a seller, I'm able to sell. Whereas currently, it's very difficult to get out of those arrangements. And so, tokenizing real estate brings like massive liquidity, I guess, to that market that previously hasn't been there. Yeah. Cool. Any last? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you do arbitrage across different exchanges and expect to make money?
There are always arbitrage opportunities. I will say the arbitrage opportunities now are much less than they used to be. You have the same people that were doing high frequency trading in Wall Street. They're involved in the arbitrage game in the crypto markets as well. So you definitely can try. I don't say that I wouldn't suggest you're going to be super successful unless you're able to.
You have to have a real good system, very fast.
There's bots doing that too.
Yep, right, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the high frequency trading thing, doing that. Yeah.
So you predicted sort of 10 years out, less power to the government. So I guess I would say that we've become very dependent on it. We build our roads, we have these social networks set up that we depend on, and things like that. Where do you see all that going? How do we all vote on putting money into fixing the road or building the road? Or?
Yeah, there are a handful of projects working on that. One of my friends in Amsterdam was working on this project called Nest Egg. It's essentially exactly what you said. It's the ability for us to crowdsource infrastructure projects. So whether that might be a fleet of autonomous cars, it might be a wind farm, it might be a bridge, or a system of roads that we collectively, as a 100,000 100,000 person county, can collectively put our money in and receive payments back on those assets that we're investing in. You can think of like 10,000 people all putting money into ownership of a toll road. And then every single time someone, a payment goes up or someone drives on that toll road, those $10 gets divided up amongst those 10,000 people. Right? It'd be extremely difficult to do that today, but we will be able to do these things pretty soon. Yeah.
A lot of these tokens are said that they don't pass the Howey test.
Sure.
And are in fact a security.
Sure.
And where do you see that shaking out? And what about the risk of buying some of these tokens that might be declared as security somewhere down the road and go bust because of that?
Right. So the regulation around whether something is security or not, specific to the Bitcoin blockchain space, is very ambiguous right now. We hope to see some guidance on that. We have seen some, but we hope to see some guidance on that in the next 6 months. They seem to be getting close to basically creating a Howey test for cryptocurrencies, essentially. I do know that billions and billions of dollars were raised in ICOs in 2017, kind of the year of the ICO. If you guys don't know what that means, it's essentially a fundraising method, a way for these new projects to raise money. Billions of dollars were raised via that method instead of going the traditional VC route. The problem there is, is this a security or is it not a security? The SEC has come out and debunked a few of them and said they are a security. I guess specifically what would you like commentary on around that?
Well, I was just wondering what your...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people that raise money, they are hard to prove that they're not a security. I would err on the side probably of saying they are a security. And we've seen a lot of those. And there's a lot of projects that are in the next year probably going to get a big fine, maybe go under, so on and so forth, because they issued an unlicensed security to people. That's why a lot of these projects, they're not raising money in the United States at all because of the ambiguity. Again, this is where we are trying to tell the SEC to get their act together so we can keep innovation here, because most of these projects are raising money outside of the United States because they don't want to go through all the framework of registering or security, or because they know it's security and they just don't want to, don't want to go through the arduous process, I guess. I do know that security tokens are becoming much easier to spin up and to come out with, and hopefully in the next 6 months we'll have a lot more guidance on exactly how it's going to play out. But yeah, Trent. Yeah.
When the U.S. dollar goes gold back, what would be the impact on Bitcoin?
Never gotten that question before. Yeah, first of all, I think it would be.
It's House Bill HR 5404.
Yep. They've been trying to do this basically ever since we got off of the gold standard. We've been trying to go back onto the gold standard. It would be astronomically hard to do it. That being said, even if they are able to do it, my guess is that it would still be a quasi-backed, so it wouldn't actually be like one gold bar is equal to $100 or whatever at your bank. I don't see how, with the current financial system built the way it is, fractional reserve banking, so on and so forth, that we could actually ever get to a system that was truly backed by gold. And ultimately, not every other government is going to be backed by gold as well. I know that there are a lot of groups of countries that are trying to oust the United States dollars as the dominant currency. I see this is where Bitcoin has a lot of opportunity to come in there and be that shining knight in armor, I guess, or maybe their tool to oust the U.S. dollar as the standard currency. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that some more, to be honest. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. The last quick thing I'll say is you have my information there. Please reach out to me. Feel free. Although I'd love to grab coffee with everyone, I probably can't, but I might be able to work something out. So please reach out to me with your questions. If you want to share an article, whatever it may be, I'm here to help. I love educating people around this kind of stuff. It's my true passion. So thank you guys.
Are you in Denver or Colorado Springs? Or
I'm in Denver. Yep.
You're in Denver.
Yep.
Well, how did you get a 719 area code?
Portable since 1989.
Yeah.
Called Portability Act.
Portability.
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado Springs is the reason there.